I've started the recording. As many of you know, Jan Kindler was a collector in the New York area, in New York City. He passed away probably 30 years ago. I'm not quite positive of that. Oh, I see Greg's on the train. Maybe that excuses his Muka stamp background here in lieu of a photograph of himself. Back to Kindler. His collection has been donated to the Friends and Colonies Society. We've been splitting the proceeds with the donor, a New Yorker named Roger Anthony. And this is the last batch of philatelic material that we have from his collection. So it's not what I would call floor sweepings by any means, but it's definitely a broader mix than just the French sewer material. So to catch everybody out, at the March party in Cleveland, I boxed up all of Kindler's philatelic material that I had and handed it off to Sterling Auctions, which is Mark Vervecki in Plymouth, Michigan. He runs auctions, I think, 3 times a year. And when we talked, he said he would spread the material over the next several auctions. He just had one close recently, so I'm guessing that we'll see this no earlier than July, and it could be as late as November before any of it comes up on the market. Nonetheless, that's where it went. And if you see any of this that you're interested in, or if you have any friends who would care to own some of the Kindler material that you see, by all means, let them know of the auction. And of course, Mark will put it on his, he'll circulate it to his mailing list as well. He's done pretty well for us in the past. I think we have no more than 1 unsold lot of the material that he's put in his auction so far. So I consider that pretty darn successful. And we have been sharing the money with Roger Anthony, the donor, and Ben, I can't remember, but we have several $1,000s that we've realized as a result of this so far.
Yes, yes.
And I expect that we'll realize that much again from what will come up in the auction. So today, I will share my screen and we'll see the rest of his philatelic material. Let's see which one am I? There we go. All right, so the presentation is a mishmash of stuff. I kept like things together, which didn't, again, as with the last batch of sewer material, postal history, I did not try and turn it into an exhibit or anything like that, but just a presentation that made some kind of sense, so that as we go through it, you'll see all the Confederate stuff together. You'll see all the remaining sewer items, of which there are a few, together. Not everything he had was in great condition, and he did have some forgeries. He had some U.S. newspaper stamp facsimiles and forgeries printed by the Senf brothers in Switzerland. So some of this stuff may not be genuine, but some of it is, or a lot of it is too. So without further ado, here's what I call the table of contents. So we've got sewer items. There was an article in this quarter's Friends and Colonies Philatelist about what we call horse collar advertising and the sewer stamps. We've got some more of those to show you. He had a few airmail covers, and he was actually quite interested in airplanes. And I've got a carton sitting behind me on the floor here that has a bunch of cards, like baseball cards, issued with airplanes on them that a friend of mine is peddling on eBay for us. And again, we'll split the proceeds net of the costs of selling on eBay. There, he had a single balloon Monte cover. He had a handful of censored covers, not all of which I scanned just because they weren't, to me, they didn't seem that interesting. He had Confederates. He had a stamp essay used on cover. He had some proofs from the Legion of French Volunteers against Bolshevism that you'll see. He had a nice selection of the Madagascar bisects, both full covers and on piece, the Saint-Nazaire locals, and finally, he had a few US locals. And that's the order I put them in, probably because that's how I picked them out of the carton. So, in the sewer material itself, he had one or two of these, and I found another one, a nice margin copy. Unfortunately, you can see that it's got some foxing, but nice margins around it, and they're cataloged, and they've got a reasonable value to them because they didn't make a lot of these essays. A nice listed variety with the inverted FM on a nice corner margin copy, and I don't remember if it's NH or not. I wasn't trying to write an auction description for it, but just to show it to us. I found another annulé postcard, which, if you remember, is what they used for training postal employees how to handle mail and to recognize correct rates and incorrect rates and to see what this kind of postal stationery looked like and so on. He had several duplicates of this card. He even had a couple of specimen envelopes. This is the small envelope, I want to say that like the carte de visite size, but they weren't very big. Here was a nice bisect used and accepted as payment, and conveniently enough, even the cancel was applied in a way to make it clear that it was a bisected stamp. So often, especially in the old US stamps, people tried to trim away half the stamp because the cancel didn't fall in a place where it would be clear one way or the other. So this one was done very nicely. This is one of the Serbian post cancels and not applied on the stamps. Sometimes the stamps were canceled with that straight line, sometimes they were not. And these were generated because the Serbian government in exile was allowed to move to Corfu, and they established an office as a government in exile there, and the French said, you can use our postage stamps, and we're going to give you a special cancel, the postage service cancel, so that you can indicate when you are sending letters out of Corfu. This is another one with both a French cancel tape and cancel marking, the oval on the right, and a Serbian army cancel, which is the purple rectangle squarely on the front of the envelope there. A letter sent from Macedonia to Geneva. This is the back side of that. I say that I couldn't see Vardar because that was the town cancel that was on the face of the envelope. And the back stamp I couldn't read either to confirm where it went. This is another Serbian exile cover with the censor marking in the upper left. Went to Wiesen, Switzerland. This time they canceled the stamps themselves with the Postus Serb cancel, or the straight line marking, which is much more typical, I think, of the use of that Serbian straight line marking. And here are the markings on the back. You can see the Wiesen receipt marking as well as the censorship. Took him 6 weeks to get from Corfu to Switzerland, which seems kind of long, even though it was late in the war. These sewers, this envelope has a letter written from a camp that's in France, which I think explains the French stamps. They may have gotten out of the camp surreptitiously, I am not sure, but there are no French postal markings. The stamps are canceled with a Montevideo Uruguayan cancel. And ultimately, the letter was delivered in Punta Arenas in Chile. So this is the kind of thing that once in a while shows up in Kindler's collection that's just there because he really thinks it's interesting. And it certainly is. Here was a German field post use of a French letter card. I suspect that the card was stolen by a German soldier when he was in France from the post office or from an individual. I don't know. And then he kept it in his backpack and carried it off to Poland when he was reassigned to the eastern part of the war zone, military zone. It was mailed through the German Feldpost as far as we can tell and delivered to Chicago. So it had a nice long trip, assuming that it's all representing a genuine use. And there's the contents. It's written in German and it appears to be a very friendly letter written to his buddy in Chicago. But because of the lack of postal markings, it's just questionable if this was made up or if this really went through the mail. If anybody has an opinion about that, I'd be happy to hear it. This is a nice use of the Sirius stamp in Alexandretta. There's a arrival stamp on the reverse. I may have that on the next slide. I don't remember. And there are very faint airmail overprints on the two Syrian stamps, C1 and C3. So it's a nice combination of the first two Syrian airmail stamps. Too bad the cancels didn't look better. No, I didn't take a scan of the back. Here we're off on a new adventure. This again relates pretty directly to these horse collar advertising stamps. This is a booklet, and these are also cataloged. This is rare, and I would call it rare, and there is one that even is more rare than this one. But Eglon prepared these booklets, and you'll see the entire contents of it as we go. They did this around 1910. I flattened it on my scanner, so you're looking at the front cover on the right, the back cover on the left. And it says, consult this book and you will recognize that, with the ellipsis. The note here is that these were authorized by the PTT in 1907, but fairly quickly they were, with the permission to make these was withdrawn because the postmen were protesting. They were able to sell stamps on their route to customers who needed a stamp to mail a letter. And when these came out, their customers started buying these little booklets at a discount, and it really irritated the postmen because their stamp sales were a nice side source of income for them. So this is the stamp panel, which is the first thing you see when you open the booklet. And if you remember it, we had the ellipsis on the front about turn the page or consult this book and you will see. And what you will see is the Eglon products are the best, which is what it says at the top. The stamps were all applied by hand to the pre-printed, pre-gummed paper in the booklet. And you can see even in my scan here that the third stamp in the left column is not the same color. So it came from a different sheet. It might have been a booklet stamp instead of a sheet single. It doesn't matter as long as there was a 10 centime stamp in there. And these are the only 8 stamps in the booklet. So this booklet might have been sold for, say, 70 or 75 centimes to get you 80 centimes worth of postage. The next page behind the stamps was a return postcard. It was it's sideways, as you can tell here, and it wasn't the full length of the booklet because that was too large to be postcard size. But it's pre-addressed to go back to Eglon, and you would have had to use one of those stamps to provide the postage. And on the other side of the card, it says, please send immediately to the station, and a space to fill in your order. And at the bottom, it says if you order at least 50 kilos of material, you get free postage. And if you want special items, then let us know and we'll quote you prices and send you samples. The next page of the booklet, and you can kind of see the postcard there on the left margin where the perforations are. Next page is a rate chart. And the booklet has a lot of this, and you'll see a lot of this in the next half dozen slides or so. But there's the basic letter rates that were in force when they prepared this Eglon booklet. Notice that the domestic postage rates include France, Algeria, Tunisia, and the colonies at this point. For anybody who does not study French postal rates, the Papers d'Affaires is for legal papers. They had a special rate so that you could send depositions or records of court cases and so on back and forth at a significantly reduced rate. As you turn the pages of the booklet, they spent a lot of money making a really pretty advertising booklet. So the printed page on the right is a continuation of the rates. It includes now postcard rates as well down towards the bottom. And over on the left side, you can read about Eglon Greece as the best and the most economical. And you can see several sizes of it for sale down at the bottom. The next page, another beautiful color print. And on the right, it continues now the carte de visite postage rate. And on the left-hand side, it is talking about, at the top, it says you can use Eglon Grease to go fast and avoid breakdowns, so automotive uses. And then down at the bottom for crankcases and transmissions. The next page, postal rates for printed matter, and down at the bottom, it starts the registered mail rates for this time period. So it's really a thorough listing of postage rates, really thorough. The left-hand side, now it's horse ointment, and at the bottom, it's a Vaseline type product, and pure Norwegian tar is one of their ingredients. That sounds pretty interesting, I guess, to use on your horses. This is the centerfold, advertising on both sides, and again, it's just more of their oil and ointment products, of which they had a lot. We get to page, what are we on? Page 10 and 11 in the booklet. Now we're further down the rate chart, if you will. And on the right-hand side, we're kind of further down the product line as well. This carbonyl Eglon seems to be a wood preservative from what my translator was telling me. And now we've run out of pictures of the material because it just isn't worth spending all the money to sell phenolysol concentrate. And on the left-hand side, we're continuing these special down the chart postal rates, like third and fourth class. Here's money order rates on the left-hand side and bug repellents for plants and fly repellents over on the right-hand side. And the last page, there's no product, there's just the tab. There's a tab sticking out on the right for that postcard. stapled at the front of the book or stuck in at the front. And we end with international money orders and telegram rates. And the inside of the back cover is blank. But that cover, I want to say in my Dallé catalog, has a catalog value of 1,500 euros. This is really a very cool piece. So I'm hopeful that it realizes a good price in the sterling sale. Here's the horse collars in use. He had one on an envelope, but even the envelope is trimmed off at the right. There may have been another stamp on the right side. I don't know. The envelope the letter was returned to the sender. You can see at the top where it says, see the back to get back to the sender. But it's a nice clear cancel on the horse collar sewer stamp. And then there's a bunch more of these. This is what they looked like in his album, let's call it. But they were pretty interesting. I like the Esperanto advertising label at the lower left. Some of these were postal stationery, so the horse collar itself was printed on the envelope, like the big piece in the middle, and then the stamp stuck in the middle of the horse collar. The one on the lower right mentions absinthe and I assume the war against alcohol, so it's a prohibition horse collar. And he made some notes about the stamp types as well, because he was such a student of the 10 centimes sewer. But as you go on and on, there were 3 or 4 pages of these in his album. And even an invert on the top row there, and another stationary piece on the lower right. It's a shame that he didn't collect these as full envelopes, because as we know, postal historians much prefer to see the whole thing, but it's still pretty cool just to have the stamps preserved still on the horse collar pieces. And the one on the lower right there has an ambulant railroad cancel. So they saw pretty broad use. Even he had a little partial sheet, which is the picture on the right side, unused. The article in the France and Colonies Philatelist talks about the one in the middle, the 3 or 4 color flags and so on. And notice that at the bottom there, it was even used for the in Morocco as well. All right, that's the end of the horse collars, and now his Balloon Monte cover went to Pontarlier, which is near the Swiss border. It was one of the exchange points for Swiss mail back and forth. There is a 1-page personal letter in addition to the news, and it was back stamped, so it made it out of Paris. I did not look up which balloon this was likely to have traveled on. But it took, what, 2 weeks? Canceled January 8 in Paris and 22 January in Pontarlier. Now into the airmail stuff. This one is a Constantinople to Marseille airmail cover. These were occupied territories in World War I, or Constantinople, because the Ottoman Empire was on which side? They were on the German side, if I remember right, in World War I. So they got a special hand stamp because it was military mail and it was sent by air, and that's the black rectangle. This airmail cover was a commemorative cachet of some sort on a flight from Vincennes to Paris. And Vincennes is now a suburb of Paris, so that could not have been a very long flight. There must have been an airstrip in Vincennes that and they then flew to Orly or somewhere like that in Paris, or Le Bourget, it says, in Paris. So a short flight and a commemorative cancel cachet applied to it. In Morocco, they printed a lot of these red border envelopes, which indicated airmail, and they were reprinted pretty regularly as they ran out and as airmail rates changed. And we'll see that on the back of this in just a moment. So this is June 1925. It's from Morocco into Paris, and it's military use because we've got a military marking in the local or in the lower left. But the envelope itself is pretty typical, and the 50 centimes airmail stamp is also pretty typical for these envelopes. On the back, they would have the airmail rates. So you can see the what am I trying to say? The rates to mail something are down at the bottom, and the weight limits and so on. And each time these rates were changed, they had to change the back of the envelope. This was you see there's two routes listed. One is the Casablanca, Toulouse. The other one is Casablanca, Oran, which was in Algeria. The second leg. Here's one with that went or came out of Dakar, Senegal, because if you remember, Larry Gardner had a really nice presentation on these pioneer Morocco airmail routes a couple of years ago, and we have the recording of that on our YouTube site. But this one was used in Dakar when they extended the Morocco route all the way to Senegal. But it was still an old envelope, so it didn't have an update on the back. This is a little newer one. You can see the rates now, 1 franc 50 from Casablanca to Paris. And it was the most common use for this era of airmail. Kindler, like I said, had an interest in airmail stuff. And one of the things that he did was he collected these airmail indicia, these labels. And some he collected on envelopes. Some he simply collected, like you see on the right side there, where somebody would have had a booklet of them that they were tearing out and sticking them on separate airmail envelopes as they were mailing letters. I have no idea if there's any value to these, but they will be part of what's auctioned off. Now to censored mail. This was a really nice 5-cent use of a Washington Franklin from Detroit to Lima, Peru. Very cool. The purple oval is the Peruvian marking, and it turned out to be returned to the sender. And I didn't copy or scan all of this for the presentation or for the auction, because it just, it's nice and it's interesting, but when you've seen a whole bunch of them, they really do all look the same after a while. This is the back side. This one was pretty interesting because of all the markings and because it was returned to sender and censored and so on. He had a few postcards from this correspondence. This one went from somewhere in France, we don't know exactly where, to Baltimore. He was self-censoring because he was a captain, the writer, and the war was over already because this is January 1919. So military information, I assume, was a lot less critical. Here's the picture side. It's really a nice looking postcard, a good picture of Neufchâteau, the little village. This is another postcard from the same correspondence, same general time period. And this time we know he was in Brest and sent it to Baltimore. And as you guys know, these, unless there's something really unusual about these postcards, mint or used postcards of this era are usually worth about 25 cents a piece unless there's something really important about them. There are gazillions of them available. My wife for a while was interested in French view cards, and she would buy a carton of 5,000 of them at a time from European auctions, and the shipping cost was about half what it cost to buy the postcards themselves. Another censored item. This one is World War II era, as you can tell from the Nazi symbol. But again, it's pretty ordinary. It's a little beat up because the paper was so poor in World War II. And again, I didn't make pictures of all of them because they weren't different enough. This piece, on the other hand, was a little nicer because it went from Sydney, Australia to New York and was censored on the way. I don't know enough about it to know if it was US or Australian censor. This is a nice censored letter from somewhere in the Pyrenees to New York, written by a Nazi soldier, sent by registered airmail, which is also very nice. Censored both by the French and by the Americans. And this was done when the Vichy section of France was still not occupied by the Nazis before they occupied the entire country. There's the backside with more postal markings on it. Another censored postcard, beautiful picture of lilies on the front side. And it was sent from Aachen to Reichsgau, which is part of the annexed part of Austria. So that made it a little more interesting. A censored cover, this time from a German artillery unit. And he had a handful of these with the Postsache preprint on it, just saying it's a postal matter. So something enclosed that was probably official mail, and it still got censored. This is a US to Australia cover, so this went the other way from the Sydney cover I had a few slides ago. No postal markings on the reverse. This one was not registered. It's paying a 5-cent rate to Australia, which would have been the correct rate for surface letters at the time during World War II, before Pearl Harbor. So it's not, we're not yet in the war in the US, but the Australians are. Nice Newfoundland censored cover as well. And now to the Confederate stuff. There's about 4 or 5 of these. Nice, I'm sorry, I call it nice. He makes a big deal about it being water stained. Well, you know what? All that does is reduce its value. But it is used to Florida, which is pretty nice. And it's not Stony Creek, West Virginia. I should correct that. I showed it to a friend who collects this stuff, but as he pointed out immediately, nobody in West Virginia would have used a Confederate stamp for anything except perhaps personal hygiene to wipe something off themselves. So he did correct this and tell me that it was a Virginia town and not West Virginia. Another Confederate stamp. Those of us who sit in the US are probably more familiar with these than the people in the UK who are watching this evening. It's kind of interesting that this stamp is canceled in Richmond, Virginia, and it's mailed to near Richmond. I have no idea how it got to its destination. And the lower left notation is the politeness of Mr. Fairholt. So perhaps he was carrying the letter and knew where this young lady was, or she was staying with him. There was some kind of connection to make the sender think that it would get there. You can see from this that there were some ink / color varieties, but in addition to that, this is a nice but pretty beat up adversity cover, which was what we called the reuse of paper, because the Confederacy had no ability to make its own paper. As the war went on, people were using wallpaper, which is what this was. They were using invoices, church records, anything that they could find where the backside of the paper was blank that they could either write on the inside or create an envelope by folding it so the printing was on the inside and the outside was blank. They could stick a stamp on it and mail it. This one, even though it's a nice wallpaper cover, because the ends are missing and the contents are missing, it probably is not a fantastically valuable item. And that's, to me, again, it's kind of indicative of Kindler's passing interest. He would have enjoyed finding an adversity cover and being able to tell his friends he had one and show it to them, but it's not something that in the US we would consider an exhibit quality item for an adversity cover. This was one of the early Confederate stamps. It's a 10-cent Thomas Jefferson stamp. Because Jefferson was a Virginian, so their early stamp issues used his image as well as Jefferson Davis, the president of the Confederacy. This one's a pretty nice use. Again, a little beat up envelope, but it's good to find that stamp used. Same with this one. This is I forget what number it is. It could be the first stamp issued by the Confederacy, and that's a portrait of Jefferson Davis, their president, on here. Clearly, it's a morning cover. Probably in 1861. It could be an 1862 use. But I think the letter rate had changed by 1862 to 10 cents. I won't guarantee that. Another third different stamp, the blue 5-cent was reissued in green. And as you saw earlier, the Jefferson stamp then became the blue one. Here's a really nice red 10-cent Jefferson. These are probably among the toughest of those first few issues of the Confederacy to find used on cover. And this is one of the best quality covers of what he had in his collection. This is a Mobile, Alabama local. And again, if you're not a U.S. collector and paying attention to this sort of thing, both before the official U.S. postage stamps were issued in 1847, and then after the Confederacy formed in 1861, and before they printed their own, let's call them national use stamps, the ones we were just looking at, there were probably 40 local post offices where the postmaster commissioned stamps. There could be more. And they were valid to get a letter, in this case from Mobile to Atlanta, but they did not, but they were only authorized to originate in Mobile. You couldn't use one of those stamps to mail from Atlanta back to Alabama. So it's a pretty cool cover, pretty cool use. Unfortunately, the Mobile stamp is damaged on the left side. That's the end of his Confederate material. And now this happens on my screen to be covered up. So if you've got the little video box open in the upper right-hand corner, it may be covering the whole point of this cover. You should be able to see a gray imperforate next to the two 10 centimes stamps. That is an essay. And it's correctly franked according to Kindler at 50 centimes. I did not check his work, but it is a registered letter from Nancy to Brussels. And I'm thinking that that 6 crayon in the middle is a due marking in Brussels. And then the little black circle right next to it there, that's the typical Belgian carrier's marking from delivering the letter, the guy who delivered it. And on the back, it's got the Brussels registration marking as well. So it's a very cool cover to have that essay used as accepted postage. We think it's accepted postage. This is the French volunteers against the Bolshevists. They prepared these really very pretty engraved stamps. This die proof is embossed by the printer, and there is a legend at the bottom of it that says special courier via airmail. The issued color is the ink color on the die, but the legend, which is in gray on this die, it was in red when they issued the final stamps, like that. So these are the final perforated stamps. They issued 141,000 sets of these. And the only value that was indicated was the 10 francs air post added on the red stamp. So I don't know, as not a collector or specialist in this, I don't know if these were used, and if they were used, what rates they paid. They also, because of the time period, many of you will recognize the geometric lathe work and the markings in the margins, and they did that just so they couldn't use the stamp paper to produce fake stamps, whether it was this design or a different one. And they did overprint them with these bilingual Eastern Front legends. So 137,000 pairs of those were issued. And Kindler said I found a note that said he had 2 covers with these stamps used, but I didn't find them in his stuff. So I don't know whatever happened to them. Here's the Madagascar bisects. And anybody who's tinkered around the French colonies and had a French colonial catalog has probably run across these. This is a pretty nice one. This is an early use of a bisect, and this may have been legitimate, although you'll notice this one is a Diego Suarez stamp that's been bisected. And Voamar was a place that ultimately did some philatelic stuff too. So I don't know if this one was okay or not, but at least it's on a full envelope. There's the back indicating that it went through the mail. So even if it was a philatelic effort, it actually did go through the mail. Here's a Madagascar stamp used in Diego Suarez, bisected there. 10 centimes cut in half to pay 5. And this letter went to Saint Denis Reunion. And there's a nice back stamp there. This is the more typical Voamar end of the era, if you will, where it's a little more suspicious that they were just doing this for philatelic reasons. They cut their Zebu traveler's tree stamps in half and created this special cancel or surcharge envelope marking. And a lot of these you will see were never addressed and sent through the mail. Another way to collect these, and they're cataloged this way as well in Dallet and Yver, is on piece. And you can see there are varieties of these. First of all, there's different values of the stamps. So we've got a 30, a 20, and a 10 bisected here. They're all tied by a legitimate postal cancel. The advice that it's a shortage of stamps varies a little bit. You can see the capital A versus lowercase a, especially between the first two on the left. And they changed the wording. You can see the two on the left are affranchissement spécial, and in the middle it's exceptionnel, or the one on the right rather says exceptionnel. So they fiddled around with this. There's about, what do you think, 20 or so of these different varieties, and they vary greatly in value. Then we're getting close to the end here. The Saint-Nazaire locals were in German territory, and the Germans authorized the Chamber of Commerce to print the underlying stamps with 50 centimes and 2 franc values. But the Germans did still occupy Saint-Nazaire. You can see it says the Atlantic Front at the bottom of the stamp. But after the German surrender, which they eventually did, the locals then overprinted with the word liberation as well. And then they reprinted the whole thing again in 1973. But I think from what I've seen in the catalog, these are more likely to have been the 1940s version. Now some US locals. He had some hussies. These guys were, I'm trying to remember where the heck these guys were. Were they New York? I think so. And this kind of stamp in the United States was very frequently counterfeited or faked. And the reason was stamp albums back then had spaces for all these locals, and there were nowhere near enough of them for the collectors at the time to fill the spaces in their album. So they got reprinted a lot by J.W. Scott, the Scott catalog people, for example, and sold to collectors, oftentimes as reprints or forgeries, or we'd call them space fillers today. But they're still floating around in the collecting world. So if I were to purchase any of these hussy covers myself, I would absolutely get them expertized to make sure that the stamps are genuine and not the fakes or the reprints. So hussies, here we go, second stamp. And yeah, I made the note here that the experts oftentimes look at the city directories, which they can find, to see if there was a real person at this address. And it's interesting that these are tied by a hussy cancel, which is a good feature. If this guy was really a lawyer in the mid-1860s in New York, it would be a good indication or a helpful indication that this is genuine. And there's no other stamp on it. So it's not like somebody was trying to dress up a stamp cover that had a 3-cent US stamp on it to pay the postage, or a 1 cent to pay the local postage. So those factors lean towards them being genuine. On the other hand, it could have been a stampless envelope, or one completely fabricated out of whole cloth and turned into an apparently valuable local stamp. And Hussey eventually changed its design and printed these black ink on colored paper stamps. You can see these two on the bottom are addressed to the same attorney at the same address who got the previous envelope as well. So they could be okay. I am not an expert. And that's it. So we've made it through in, what has it been, 4 or 5 presentations it's taken to get through Kindler's collection. To me, it's been really fun because I've been able to handle all of this, and I hope it's been fun for you as well. What I've take away from this is he was an eclectic collector. He bought whatever he was interested in, but his real love was clearly the 10 centimes sewer stamp. That's what he studied, and that's what we found the most of in what came to us. He got some interesting stuff because he knew the New York dealers. He was a member of the France and Colony Society, which at the time was very much a New York-based organization. And as I don't know about you guys, but I can look around my stamp room where I'm sitting, and I too can see that I would be described as an eclectic collector as well, with 2 or 3 things that I focus on and a bunch of other stuff that's ended up in my stamp room. This will be on the website. We'll get that up in the next week or so. And while I say at the bottom, some of it may have been auctioned already, it has not been, because I just handed it over in mid-March, and there's been no sale since then. So does anybody have any questions or want me to go back to look at anything that we've already seen today?
Yeah, Ken, what era was Kindler collecting in? When did he die, for example?
He died in 95. And Ed, you said you met him and have a recollection of him?
Oh yeah, I joined the France and Colonies group. I think in '72, and he was a member then, and a regular attendee at meetings. And he did give a solar presentation. I remember bits and pieces of that. And he used to come regularly to the big ASDA shows in March and October of every year that we had in New York. So he was a regular member.
Yep. He
was also a very good friend of Man Ray, the famous artist. And he never brought him to a meeting, though.
Dick, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I have a question. It's not about this presentation. It's more general. I'm looking for the book, Liberation Stamps by Jacques Léon. If anybody has any idea where I can find one, I would greatly appreciate knowing. It's a 1964 book. It's out of print. It's devilishly tough to find.
I don't know. Bill. Oh, go ahead. Somebody have a comment for Dick?
No, this is Ed again. I just another thought. Now I've forgotten it. That happens. I'll be back in a second.
Okay, Bill.
Hi, I wanted just to comment about 2 things. First, the postal stationery that was perforated all the way around, sent by the German soldier from Poland back in,
The letter card, yes.
Yeah, the letter card. And those usually, when they were used, people used the perforations. And so I found it curious how this one was intact. So if that means anything, whether or not it was a genuine usage, I can't tell you. But it was just interesting because all the ones that I've seen genuinely used show those perforations to have been, they did their work, right?
Usually, yes.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to comment about was that beautiful advertising piece with all the petroleum. And I would share something about petroleum history about this area. It's interesting that oil production in those days, this is a petroleum product, okay? And that petroleum, and I'm going to butcher the name of this town, but Pechelbronn, help me out with the pronunciation, Pechelbronn, is in the easternmost tip of France, in the Alsace region. And oil sands were mined there beginning right around the time, just before this brochure was produced. The name of the town, it's Pitch Spring or a pitch fountain. And the oil sands, the reason that they're mined as a sand and not pumped out as liquid from a well is that the majority of the petroleum has either biodegraded or been water washed. The water soluble components are washed away, and it leaves the tar behind. The tar is refined into a pitch, and that those kinds of things were used as wood preservatives. We start thinking about, there were some patent medicines that had this pitch in them in those days. But this was before France was consuming enough petroleum to need to import it from the United States. So this was some homegrown petroleum that they're advertising the products that are made from. Kind of fun to know about that. Yeah.
Hey, I opened the chat here, and Bruce asked for the auction house again. It is Sterling Stamps or Sterling Auctions. The guy's in Plymouth, Michigan.
Ken, I remembered my question. Was there much French representation in the earlier sales?
As to who bought the material?
Yeah.
I have no idea who his customers were.
Oh, okay. I was just, there's actually some very nice material in the section you showed today. And I was wondering if that might be worth a couple $100 ad someplace in France.
Right.
And maybe like in Lecco, something like that. There are a couple of pieces in there that would be nice to have a little competition for them.
Yep. Alan Silverstone notes that Eglon is still in business. So we still need grease and oil. Anybody else? All right. I will say that next month we have a holiday in the United States on the weekend of our normal presentation, so we'll skip that one. And instead, we'll be back in June. And Ed, that's going to be you, right?
Oh, I don't know. Is it? Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, okay. I'll mark it on my calendar.
please do.
All
And you
right.
told me what you're going to talk about, and I've forgotten.
Yeah, I told you I was going to talk about the use of due stamps in reunion for the
Yes.
3-week period in 1901. I talked about that at a society meeting, I think at NAPEX in 2017. And I don't know how many people here today were there in 2017. Might be a good time to do this one again.
I think so. I think at most you and Ben and I might have been there, but I don't think anybody else was who's on the screen here.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I'm also adding a section. Turns out I had a couple of nice reunion, rare reunion covers, and I'm throwing them into the mix too.
Good.
So I should have done a one frame exhibit of reunion. I never did it. It just occurred to me while putting those covers in.
Yep.
So,
All right. Well, I thank everybody for attending today, especially on such short notice. And we will convene again on the 4th Sunday in June at 3 o'clock Eastern Time. And that's it.
okay. Bye-bye.
Bye now, and thanks again.
Thank you, Ken.